Most people move through life believing they are surrounded by other people. From childhood onward, it seems obvious that there is you, and then there is everyone else. Every conversation becomes a meeting between separate individuals, each carrying different thoughts, different emotions, different needs, and different expectations. Without ever consciously deciding to, you begin navigating life as though every relationship requires careful management. You wonder whether people understand you. You replay conversations long after they have ended. You think about what you should have said, or whether you revealed too much. Sometimes you hold back to avoid rejection. Other times you explain yourself endlessly, hoping that if you can only find the right words, someone will finally see what you mean. Even the simplest interactions begin carrying invisible weight. You manage impressions without noticing. You defend opinions because they feel connected to who you are. You avoid conflict, or sometimes create it, believing that your safety, belonging, or happiness depends upon how another person responds. Even kindness can quietly become an attempt to secure connection. Even generosity can carry the hope of being appreciated. Relationships begin to feel like something that must constantly be maintained. And even love, perhaps the place we expect to feel most at ease, can slowly become filled with effort. We try to preserve closeness. We worry about losing it. We look for reassurance that we matter. Beneath every conversation, every disagreement, every embrace, and every moment of silence sits one invisible assumption that almost nobody ever questions. I am here. They are there. And somehow the distance between us must constantly be managed. Perhaps that single assumption has been shaping every relationship you have ever known. The assumption of separation does far more than shape the way we think about relationships. It quietly organizes the entire nervous system. Once the body believes it is a separate self, moving through a world of other separate selves, every interaction becomes an evaluation. Long before the conscious mind begins interpreting what is happening, the nervous system is already asking questions. Am I safe here? Am I accepted? Am I respected? Am I being judged? Am I losing something? Can I trust this person? These questions rarely appear as words. They arise as subtle contractions in the body, tiny shifts of attention, emotional reactions, impulses to speak, defend, withdraw, or explain. The nervous system is not trying to make life difficult. It is simply doing what it believes is necessary to protect the separate self it assumes you are. From this orientation, relationships become negotiation. You listen, but part of you is already preparing your response. Instead of simply receiving another person's words, the mind compares them with your own opinions, searches for agreement or disagreement, and quietly decides what they might mean about you. Speaking also changes. Words become more than communication, they become positioning. You choose language that protects your image, reinforces your identity, or increases the likelihood of being understood. Sometimes you speak to connect. Sometimes you speak to defend. Sometimes you speak simply to avoid silence, because silence can feel uncertain. Even helping others can become subtly organized around identity. Being supportive feels good because it confirms that you are kind. Being knowledgeable confirms that you are intelligent. Being needed confirms that you matter. Without realizing it, generosity can become intertwined with self-protection. The action may still benefit another person, but somewhere beneath it sits the quiet hope that something will return. Appreciation, belonging, security, recognition, or love. Teaching often follows the same pattern. Instead of becoming a natural expression of understanding, it can become an attempt to prove credibility. The focus quietly shifts from serving truth to protecting the identity of the one who knows. Even love can become transactional, not intentionally and often not visibly, but subtly. I will stay open if you stay open. I will trust if you reassure me. I will give if I know I won't lose myself. Love slowly becomes an exchange between two identities trying to remain safe while reaching toward one another. The body carries this invisible work continuously. It contracts around maintaining a self in relationship with another self. It monitors reactions, predicts outcomes, remembers past hurts, and anticipates future possibilities. None of this usually feels unusual because it has been happening for so long that it simply feels like being human. But beneath all of this activity lies a quiet exhaustion. Not because relationships are inherently difficult, not because people are the problem, but because maintaining the experience of separation requires an extraordinary amount of energy. The nervous system is constantly trying to preserve boundaries that awakening gradually reveals were never as solid as they first appeared. And the moment that effort begins to soften, relationships themselves begin to change, not because other people become different, but because the one struggling to remain separate begins to disappear. As awakening deepens, something so subtle begins to change that at first it is almost impossible to describe. Nothing dramatic happens to the world itself. The same people remain, the same conversations continue, the same responsibilities exist. Yet the feeling of standing apart from life slowly begins to dissolve. The world no longer appears as something outside you that must be understood, managed, or navigated. The invisible distance between yourself and everything you encounter becomes thinner, until eventually it begins disappearing altogether. People are no longer experienced primarily as separate individuals living independent lives. They become different expressions of the same life appearing in different forms. The differences remain. Every person still has their own history, personality, preferences, and perspective. Awakening does not erase individuality. It simply removes the belief that individuality exists independently from the whole. You begin recognizing the same consciousness looking through countless pairs of eyes, the same aliveness speaking through different voices, the same intelligence exploring itself through endless forms. This recognition quietly transforms the way you relate. Listening changes first. Instead of hearing another person through layers of judgment, comparison, or anticipation, listening becomes direct. There is less interpretation because there is less need to defend an identity. Attention becomes available in a way it never was before. You are no longer listening primarily to decide whether you agree, or whether you should respond, or whether you are being appreciated. You simply listen, and in that openness, another person often feels understood before you have spoken a single word. The need to convince also begins fading. Much of our communication is organized around trying to move other people toward our own conclusions. We explain, we persuade, we defend, we justify, we subtly seek agreement, because agreement feels like confirmation of who we are. But when the sense of separation softens, the urgency to change another person softens with it. Truth no longer needs protection. It simply expresses itself. Compassion changes in exactly the same way. Most people think compassion is something they must intentionally practice. They try to become more patient, more forgiving, more understanding. But compassion that requires effort is often compassion managed by identity. As separation dissolves, compassion ceases to be a behavior. It becomes perception. You no longer experience another person's joy or suffering as happening entirely outside yourself. Their experience is not absorbed as a burden, nor observed from a distance. It is simply recognized as another movement within the same field of life. Care becomes natural because there is no longer such a rigid boundary between their experience and my experience. This does not make you emotionally overwhelmed, quite the opposite. Because there is less self to protect, there is also less resistance. Care happens without contraction. Presence replaces rescue. Listening replaces fixing. Sometimes the most loving response is not doing more. It is interfering less. Teaching undergoes an equally profound transformation. In the beginning, teaching often feels like transferring knowledge from one person to another. You gather insights, organize ideas, and hope that better explanations will produce greater understanding. But eventually you notice something surprising. The deepest moments of transformation rarely happen because of your words. They happen because of the quality of presence from which those words arise. People begin responding to something they cannot easily describe. Your tone becomes as important as your language. Your stillness communicates as clearly as your explanations. Even silence begins carrying meaning. Not because silence itself is magical, but because there is no longer so much internal noise interrupting what is naturally present. The field of relationship becomes the teacher. Words simply participate. Creation changes in much the same way. Earlier in life, creating often feels deeply personal. You search for original ideas. You worry about whether your work is good enough. You compare yourself to others. You wonder how your work will be received. The mind claims authorship of everything it produces. I created this. This is my work. This is my achievement. But as identity becomes lighter, ideas begin arriving differently. Instead of feeling manufactured, they feel discovered. Instead of being forced into existence, they seem to emerge naturally when conditions are ready. Work begins moving through you rather than being produced by you. You still participate fully, you still write, you still build, you still create, but there is remarkably little sense of ownership. The work belongs to the moment that called it forth. And because so much psychological effort has disappeared, something unexpected happens. There is less striving, yet greater precision. Less planning, yet better timing. Less self-reference, yet deeper intimacy. Life becomes astonishingly responsive. Every conversation reveals something. Every encounter adjusts the field. Every relationship becomes part of an ongoing movement of learning. The world is no longer experienced as countless separate encounters between isolated individuals. It begins revealing itself as one continuous living conversation. Life meeting itself, learning from itself, creating through itself, and recognizing itself in every face it encounters. At this point, it is important to understand what this recognition is not. It is not adopting a new philosophy. It is not convincing yourself that everyone is one. It is not repeating spiritual ideas until they sound true. And it is certainly not becoming endlessly agreeable or pretending that differences no longer exist. Individuality continues. Personalities remain. Boundaries still matter. Wisdom still distinguishes what serves life from what does not. What changes is something far quieter than belief. It is a physiological shift. The nervous system gradually stops organizing itself around the assumption of separation. For most of life, the body has learned to approach every interaction from the perspective of a separate self. It prepares to protect, to evaluate, to compare, to defend, and to secure its place within the world. These patterns become so familiar that they feel inseparable from being human. But as awakening matures, those patterns begin relaxing on their own. Not because you force them to stop, not because you become better at controlling your thoughts, but because the body no longer experiences every encounter as a meeting between fundamentally separate centers of consciousness. The need for constant strategy begins to dissolve. Presence quietly replaces strategy. Instead of wondering how you should appear, you simply arrive. Instead of calculating what another person needs to hear, you become available to what the moment is already asking for. Instead of protecting an identity, attention becomes free enough to rest with what is actually happening. Coherence gradually replaces performance. There is less effort spent maintaining an image, less pressure to be wise, less need to sound spiritual. Less concern about whether you are succeeding in being compassionate, loving, or awakened. The nervous system no longer organizes around becoming someone. It settles into simply being. Attention softens. Without the constant task of monitoring yourself, awareness naturally expands. You begin noticing subtleties that were always present but were hidden beneath the activity of self-reference. Listening deepens. You hear not only words but pauses, not only explanations, but emotions, not only reactions, but the quiet humanity beneath them. You are no longer listening through the filter of, what does this mean about me? You are simply present enough to receive another person's experience without immediately turning it into your own story. Action becomes simpler as well. There is less hesitation, less overthinking, less internal debate. Responses arise naturally from the intelligence of the moment, rather than from the calculations of identity. This is why compassion no longer feels manufactured. Earlier, compassion often required effort. You reminded yourself to be patient. tried to forgive, you consciously chose kindness. There is nothing wrong with these practices. They can soften the heart and open the way. But eventually something more natural begins to emerge. Compassion is no longer something you perform. It is what remains whenever resistance relaxes. Care appears without obligation. Understanding appears without analysis. Patience appears without suppression. Nothing has been added. Something unnecessary has simply fallen away. Life begins meeting itself through you. The boundaries that once felt so solid become increasingly transparent, allowing the intelligence moving through all of life to express itself with less interference. Relationships are no longer centered around managing people, protecting identities, or securing outcomes. They become opportunities to participate honestly in the same living field. There is still conversation, still disagreement, still laughter, still grief, still learning. But beneath every interaction runs a quiet recognition that changes everything. There are no longer two separate lives trying to bridge an impossible distance. There is one life, endlessly discovering itself through relationship. Close slowly. Perhaps the deepest intimacy has never depended on finding the right person. Perhaps it has always depended on the gradual disappearance of the distance you imagined existed between yourself and life. For so much of our lives, we have tried to bridge that distance. We have searched for people who would complete us, conversations that would finally make us feel understood, communities where we could fully belong, teachers who would give us the final answer, experiences that would remove the feeling of separation once and for all. Yet, perhaps separation was never something that needed to be overcome. Perhaps it was only something that needed to be seen. Because when the illusion of distance begins to soften, everything quietly changes. Conversation changes. You are no longer trying so hard to be heard. You become available to truly listen. Teaching changes. There is less desire to persuade, more willingness to embody. Creation changes. You stop asking what will make the greatest impression. You begin allowing life to express what is already ready to emerge. Love changes. It no longer depends so heavily upon reassurance, agreement, or certainty. It becomes less about holding on and more about allowing life to meet itself freely through another human being. Even the ordinary begins to feel different. A shared meal, a walk through the neighborhood, a quiet conversation, a smile exchanged with a stranger. Nothing about these moments becomes more dramatic. Yet somehow they become immeasurably deeper. Not because life has become more extraordinary, but because nothing is any longer experienced as truly outside of you. The world begins to lose its sense of otherness. What once appeared as countless separate lives reveals itself as one continuous movement of being, endlessly expressing itself in different forms. Perhaps this is what awakening has been revealing all along. Not that you must transcend the world. Not that you must escape relationships. Not that you must become someone wiser, purer, or more spiritual than everyone else. But that the world was never something you needed to conquer. It was never something you needed to completely understand. It was never even something you needed to connect with. It has always been the living movement of being, meeting itself, learning from itself, loving itself, creating through itself, through every face, every conversation, every act of kindness, every moment of silence, and through you.